Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on behalf of the Office of National Mission. We're so glad that you are joining us. And for our presenter today, we have the Reverend Richard Schlak. He is the director of the Lutheran Hispanic Missionary Institute. And unfortunately, he was delayed very slightly, so we're still waiting for Pastor Schlak to log on, but he should be here in just a moment, so we thank you for your patience. In the meantime, just maybe want to share a little bit with you that Richard Schlak is a missionary among the Hispanics for a very, very long time. He was a missionary in Venezuela for a number of years. And then more than 10 years ago already, Richard agreed to become the director of the Lutheran Hispanic Missionary Institute. And that institute, which is based in El Paso, Texas, has as its purpose to multiply and to train Hispanic workers for the harvest. So Richard has been working at that for 10 years already. I was involved with the founding of that institute that has as its purpose to help to train those workers to be able to plant new ministries. So that ministry began with its roots in the Rocky Mountain District. A lot of people may not know that El Paso County, Texas, is part of the Rocky Mountain District. Has to do a lot with just a close relationship with El Paso, with New Mexico, a bit more than Texas, just because of the great distances there. So that work began there quite a number of years ago, and so we're glad that it continues to this very day. So Richard, like I said, has been working there for about more than 10 years and doing great work there. He and his wife Maritza have 3 grown children, and they're just wonderful people to know. As I see Richard's face appearing, which is very good. Welcome, Richard. Just a little bit of a reminder about how our webinars work. I'll hand it over to Richard in just a minute or so, and then he'll chat for a while with us, and it's sort of a one-way conversation. And then after about 45 minutes, we'll gather questions from our participants. And so just submit those in the question and answer feature that you find on this webinar on Zoom. And then I will moderate those questions and pass them on to Richard at the end of his speaking. So welcome, Richard. I see that you're still muted there, so I might need to unmute your computer there. And so welcome, good to see you today. Has it been a hectic day so far?
It has been a hectic day, getting ready to go out to Phoenix this afternoon.
Ah, very good, very good. Well, that sounds like, and we chatted earlier, and did you say you were driving?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and those are Western numbers, so that those are big miles, although it's wide open country there. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful drive from there. So yeah. Very good. Welcome, Richard, and we're glad to have you with us. And when you're ready, I'll just hand it on over to you if you get a chance to bring your PowerPoint up whenever you're ready.
All righty.
Perfect. Right. Thank you.
Well, I heard that you were already giving the introduction, so I don't need to introduce myself. I don't, not even sure how many people are here or anything else, but welcome.
I see some old friends on there for sure.
Okay. Well, today we're going to talk about working together to establish and nurture Hispanic ministries and congregations. Now, we can't cover everything by any means. And the thing that I would like to focus on, especially today, is going to be the working together across cultures more than anything else. If we have another opportunity at another time, we can talk about models for ministry. I think that that's also extremely important, not only for Hispanic ministry, but also for ministry with different cultures in any place. There have been some changes in the thinking of missiologists over the past couple of decades, and I think that we need to take into consideration some of those things. But right now, I think we want to talk about working together, especially with cultural and other differences. You know, a number of years ago, I was at Fort Worth leading a Hispanic ministry workshop at St. Paul Lutheran Church. I don't know if any of you know that church. St. Paul helped launch a Hispanic ministry many years back, and that ministry had a lot of numerical success. At one point, there were between 100 and 200 people worshiping regularly in Spanish. And there was a recovery program that was helping over 400 people with different kinds of addictions. But the program isn't active today. The worship services aren't going any longer. In that sense, the ministry failed because it did not last. Now, obviously, we don't want to say that a ministry failed because it closed. The ministry, while it was going on, did a lot. But in the sense that we would like to see sustainable ministries going on, that in that sense, it wasn't something that lasted. And St. Paul is not the only Lutheran church that has tried Hispanic ministry, but it didn't work, in quotes, because it wasn't sustainable. On the one hand, there are places where Hispanic ministry is flourishing, but in other places it's limped along or it hasn't continued. So I think we need to talk about some of the reasons why some of that may have happened. Now, you may be thinking, why do you need to have Hispanic ministry at all? I mean, Jesus has sent us to the whole world, all nations, not just to Hispanics. Why should we have something specifically designated for a group? Maybe many people say, well, why can't they just come to our church? We'll accept anybody. Why should we have to change in order to accommodate these people? Why don't they change in order to come to our church? I think that the quick and dirty reason is that, yes, we have been sent to all people, and the reason why we need to concentrate here is because we're not doing it. When we look at our church body, it's one of the least culturally diverse church bodies in America. In fact, according to at least some statistics, the only one that is worse than us is the ELCA. That's not good. That means that we are not maybe taking to heart as much as we should the mandate to reach out to everyone. Hispanic ministry I see as something akin to Paul's Gentile ministry, that Paul was called particularly as an apostle to the Gentiles. And that didn't mean that he neglected the Jews. He preached in synagogues. He was a Jew himself, but it did mean that he realized that God himself called Paul to shore up a place where the Jewish Christian church was not doing a good job. And that, I think, is where we come in. We need to be showing Christ's love to all people, and increasingly, that means Hispanics in our neighborhoods. As individual Christians, we need to be showing Christ's love, and as congregations, where we need to be showing the love of Christ. As individuals, just sharing Jesus's love in our own lives and to the neighbors that God has given us is something that's very powerful. You know, my father was a German through and through. His parents, well, his father came over from Germany, and his mother was a German born here in the United States, but she was German also. And his church is a very Anglo church, but there are Hispanics in Ascension Lutheran Church today, in large part because of my father. He put Jesus's love into practice. He was always helping his neighbors, visiting people in the hospital, having a helping hand. He had a built-in radar that would detect new people at the church And he would be the first to go up and start a conversation. And it didn't matter to him whether the person was Anglo, Hispanic, African American, Asian, or from the North Pole. That kind of Hispanic ministry, everyone can and should be doing now. However, when we're talking about planting new congregations, that's another level of things. For that, I think we need to be realizing that we're not going to be able to do it just on our own. It's got to be a team ministry. And when we say team ministry in establishing Hispanic churches or ministries, that could mean a couple of different things. First of all, it could be that the congregation or a number of congregations, especially in the case of like national missions, sends a team, gets a team together and sends them out, supports them in order to plant a new church or a new ministry. On the other hand, it could be that the congregation itself or a set of congregations are the team. That is to say, the congregation is wanting to reach out to the across cultures to the people who are maybe different from the majority. And we have Paul's example, biblical Paul, not St. Paul Lutheran Church in Fort Worth, but the biblical Paul. Paul was sent out by a congregation. The Holy Spirit guided the leaders of Antioch Christian Church to send Paul and Barnabas out as a team. So there was a team sending a team. And during all of Paul's ministry, he was constantly working in teams. It was rare that he was off on his own. He was bringing up new team members. And he established congregations where there were teams of leaders as well. And that was perhaps the pattern for any kind of cross-cultural ministry that we do today. Paul is the one whom we can base everything off on. So you can see that congregations are key as part of a team ministry. And part of what we need to take into consideration when we're going to be planting a cross-cultural church or ministry is preparing the sending congregation or the congregation where it is all going to be taking place. It's not easy to start a change, to start something new in a congregation or by a congregation. Ken Benkin notes that when you first start out, you've got very few people. Let me just grab this here on my little light here. When you first start out something new, there are very few people who are jumping on board with something new. Most are going to be kind of neutral, and there's going to be a substantial group of people who do not want anything to change at all. But what we want to do is provide biblical and practical reasons for the change so that more and more people are getting on board, so that some of the neutral people become people ready to start something new in the Lord's name, and some of the people who are against everything at least become neutral. So that you have at least a majority of your people on board. It doesn't do us any good to be sharing Jesus on a personal level, and when we bring them to church, then they get the cold shoulder. Now, change is not easy. We need to be doing intentional things in order to create the environment whereby we are going to be all on the same page in sharing Jesus's love. That means getting the word out, publicity, talking with individuals about what they think, about what the Lord has to say, preaching and teaching about missional commands, promises, and the Lord's word. You may have Bible studies like Together in Mission with Ken Bankin, or other things that you can use. You need to be reporting things regularly, encouraging participation. There's a church here in El Paso where they started a Hispanic ministry, Spanish language Hispanic ministry in the church itself, and had some problems. And when they brought it up before the elders, I was at that elders meeting, most of the elders had no clue about anything that was going on in the Hispanic ministry. They didn't know there was a problem. They didn't even know what the Hispanic ministry was doing. That was just something that the pastor wanted to do. It was his baby. That was it. That's not going to work. I think that when we talk about this, as we prepare the congregation, we need to keep in mind also the reason why we're going to be doing this ministry. What's the goal? What's the mission that God has given us? People get into Hispanic ministry for all kinds of different reasons. Some of us say, well, we got a lot of Hispanics in the community and our church is declining. We need to fill the pews. That's why we need Hispanic ministry. Or we take a look at the budget and see that the offerings are down. We need more people in here in order to get the budget up. Or because we simply want to feel good about ourselves. Wow, I am doing Hispanic ministry. Or I feel guilty because I haven't been doing Hispanic ministry. All of those reasons are inadequate. First of all, at many times, they may be unrealistic. And secondly, they're selfish. One deaconess told me one time, Hispanics can sense when people are offering help out of self-serving motives to boost numbers or something else. They'll be loyal just as long as they get the benefits or someone else doesn't offer something better. In other words, some Hispanic ministries have failed in the long term because the congregation supporting the outreach had selfish expectations or hoping that the Hispanics were going to solve the church's problems or make everybody feel good. And when the numbers didn't go the way they wanted, they washed their hands. In the end, there really is only one adequate reason. God is sending us as individuals and as a church to share Jesus's love with our neighbors, and many of them are Hispanic. And that means if one thing doesn't work, okay, if it's not as effective at sharing Christ's love, well, you don't just give up, you try something else. You have an attitude of prayer, you follow God's will, and not looking for our own. Another challenge in Hispanic ministry and in teamwork in Hispanic ministry is overcoming stereotypes. We non-Hispanics tend to have the idea that all Hispanics are alike and that they are all recent immigrants. But Anglos are not all alike, and Latinos or Hispanics are not all alike either. They come from different backgrounds, have been in the United States for different lengths of time. You know, your neighbor Maria may have just recently arrived from Mexico. Jose's family may have been living in America before the Pilgrims arrived. You know, in 1954, a Hispanic lawyer named Garcia was arguing a civil rights case before the Supreme Court of the United States. And one of the justices wondered whether the Mexican Americans that were being treated in this case were even citizens. Garcia replied that his ancestors had been in Texas 100 years before Sam Houston, that wetback from Tennessee, ever arrived. Interesting. So we need to not make assumptions and talk to our Latino neighbors and figure out where they really are at. Another stereotype that is very prevalent is that all Latinos, all Hispanics are Roman Catholic. Why do we need to evangelize them in the first place? Well, it's true that many Latinos are Roman Catholic. The Roman Catholic Church is by far the biggest church in most of Latin America. But the ones that we find here in the United States may be nominal Catholics, that is, Catholics in name only. Find an awful lot of that in Latin America as well. They may be syncretistic Catholics, mixing Spiritism and any kind of other stuff with their Catholicism. They may be sincere Catholics, and if that's the case, we don't necessarily need to be stealing sheep. They may not be Catholic at all. According to George Barna, almost half of the Latinos in the US do not even call themselves Catholic. So I think we need to be clear. I'm not worried about the salvation of any Latino Catholic who sincerely believes in Jesus Christ. It is true. The Roman Catholic Church has theology that is problematic at best. It leaves a lot to be desired. But, you know, there's an awful lot of people who do not know Jesus Christ as their Savior. You can't just simply assume that your Latino neighbor already believes in Jesus. Another stereotype is that everyone is a recent immigrant, or that most Hispanics or Latinos are here illegally. Now, immigration is a complex issue. I'm not going to resolve it here, but I need to clear something up. The great majority of the Latinos in the US, including my wife and my children, are citizens or they're legal residents. In the mission that I have been helping with here in El Paso, every Latino person attending is a citizen or a legal resident. Furthermore, the minority of Latinos who do not have the right papers still, or maybe even especially, need Christ's love. Jesus reached out to the tax collectors and sinners, and we need to do the same. We proclaim Christ to everyone, whatever their immigration status is. The Bible says, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. It may be helpful to remember the two kingdoms theology. Kind of dividing up areas where God works. Now, in a certain sense, we can't necessarily isolate the two areas, okay? But it is helpful to know that there are certain things that are required for us in our role as citizens, Christian citizens of the United States, but also as citizens of heaven. In the church, what Lutheran theologians often call the right-hand kingdom, our mission is to proclaim salvation, and the weapon is the word of God. That's our tool. So the church should have no problems whatsoever ministering to immigrants without worrying about their immigration status. In the government, the left-hand kingdom, the mission is something different. The mission is not proclaiming salvation, but protecting society. And the weapon is the sword, or the law, basically. And there we can debate and talk about what would be the best way of dealing with immigrants and immigration issues. There are a lot of things to keep in mind. There are economic considerations, cultural considerations, national security considerations, family considerations, complicated immigration law. It is at least, if not more, complicated than the tax code. A lot of things to keep in mind. But for our purposes, what we need to do is just concentrate on what the Lord has given us, and that is ministering in the name of Jesus. The overwhelming majority of Hispanics in the US, again, are citizens, or they have legal visas. Now there are a number of other challenges that we need to keep in mind, especially when we're trying to work in teams. There's a challenge with regard to language. Most Hispanics speak English. That seems strange to you maybe, because most of our Hispanic ministries are Spanish language ministries. But when we talk about Spanish language ministries, we're really only talking about ministering to recent immigrants. When we get to the second and third generation, that is the kids and grandkids and so on of the people who have come as immigrants, they're English dominant. This is a picture of the kids at the mission that I've been working with for some time here in El Paso. All of those kids are English dominant. In fact, some of them have a little difficulty with Spanish. One of them was playing in the praise band that we had, and her mother turned to her and said, "Wow, that was a wonderful song. Didn't you just feel the presence of the Lord in that song?" And her daughter said, "Well, I felt something, but I didn't understand what we were singing." There's also a challenge to get past of the past. You can see that sign there. It was in the 1950s still that you could see signs like this in restaurants here in Texas. No dogs, no Negroes, no Mexicans. Wow. Yeah, there are humps to get over when we, as non-Hispanics, want to reach out to Hispanics here in the United States. Many Hispanics that grew up in the Catholic Church have automatically a negative view of Luther. Luther, for them, was a heretic. He was a cultist. There's been also a history of Anglo discrimination and oppression even. Hispanics tend to see themselves as the peons and other people as the ones who lord it over them. That's why it's not enough just to say, hey, our church is welcoming. They're welcome here. They should just come in the door. They are not likely to make the first move. They see the church, the Lutheran church in particular, as a German church and not as a church that is necessarily welcoming to Hispanics. That's why we need to take the first step. And, you know, as Christians, that shouldn't be a big hurdle. I mean, we shouldn't be just sitting on our laurels waiting for people to come in the door. We should be seeing how we can show Jesus's love and talk about Jesus with the people that are around us. If we're talking about working in teams, something that happened with St. Paul in biblical times is something that's happening here as well. And that is, there's a challenge of the second generation. Again, when we talk about generations, the first generation, it refers to recent immigrants, people who were born overseas and came here to the United States. The second generation is the children born to those immigrants. The third generation is the grandchildren. And sometimes they're called native born or US born Latinos. There's also the 1.5 generation, children who were born in Latin America but came to the US as an early age. And you can see my daughter there in the picture. She is a 1.5 generation. She was born in Venezuela, and we came to the United States when she was in second grade or third grade. Now, what's the problem with this? Well, first of all, second and third generation is important to have ministry by and with them because they're the majority. Even now, right now, this statistic is from 2013, but even at that point, you can see that the people who are the Hispanics who were born here in the US are much, much more numerous than the people who were born outside of the US. Secondly, they have differences. They do not necessarily fit in very easily. They are different in their language use. You can see right here, the first generation, maybe more than 70% Spanish dominant. By contrast, the second generation is only 4% Spanish dominant. 96% is English dominant or bilingual. You can see that illustrated here. The grandma speaks only Spanish. The grandchild, sorry, I don't speak Spanish. The educational level is different for the native-born Hispanics. They tend to have more people going to college and beyond. Their employment and earnings are different, much, much greater. The marriage patterns are different. You see more intercultural marriages. So you can see that it's going to be a challenge to deal with the first generation as well as the second and third generation. St. Paul had that happen to him. The early church had native Jews from Judea, but then they also had Jews that had been dispersed to all different nations, and they were second, third, fourth generation immigrants in those nations. Many of them didn't know Hebrew anymore. It was them to whom Peter preached at Pentecost. Paul ended up having some of them as on his mission team. Barnabas and Mark were second generation, and later on Paul had more. So you can see that while there are challenges, those challenges are not something new. Okay. I'm going to skip over some things here because I want to get to one of the main points that I wanted to discuss with you, the cultural differences. When we go out as a team, even on our team members, we may have cultural differences, and certainly we're going to be seeing cultural differences in the congregation that is supporting the ministry or being the basis for the ministry. Jesus said, "By this all men will know you are my disciples if you love one another." I think that our reality is that we have to work together. If we do not work together, it's not going to work, okay? Non-Hispanics and Hispanics need to be working together. First generation and subsequent generations need to work together. Rich, poor, economic differences, sexual differences, men and women, pastors, lay people, we need to be together. But I want to focus on the cultural clashes in particular today. Culture is a pattern. It's a total pattern of a particular society with all of its assumptions, values, and forms. It's a whole way of life. And it's a way of life that is shared by a group. Some people talk about macro cultures and subcultures, and that's valid. The problem is that even though we may identify certain characteristics of certain cultures, that doesn't mean that everyone in that culture shares all of those characteristics. What you can find is our tendencies, and that's something that we need to be very clear about. Although I'm going to talk about some difference tendencies amongst Hispanics and non-Hispanics here in the United States, that doesn't mean that that is set in stone. That does not absolve you from finding out what the person in front of you really is like. That person may or may not conform in every way to what you can see overall for the group. And yet we can identify certain points where people who are identified with different cultures may have different ways of looking at things and may come into conflict. It is very easy for us to think that my culture is the best. My culture does things well because it works. It works for me. And it seems impossible that someone else would have a different view. It obviously they are subpar. They are not getting it. If they would just convert to what I do, then things would be better. That's what we think. Now we need to get past these cultural barriers. And the biggest thing I think is to pray to realize that my culture it's fine, but it may have some flaws as well. And to start appreciating the good in other cultures. I think any of you who have lived in a different culture, like I have overseas, you come back to the United States and you start seeing things that you didn't see before, things that you took for granted, and then you realize, you know what, that may not be the best way of doing things. There may be other good ways of doing things. And as well, understanding that there may be conflicts because I see things a certain way and you see things a different way, and that we're ready to cut each other some slack and put reconciliation and forgiveness into practice. Now, let's see some things about understanding each other, Hispanics and non-Hispanics. Mark, as I understand it, I've got about 10 minutes more and then there's questions, is that correct? 5 minutes more? Oh boy. Okay. I put on here.
Richard, 10, if you want to go 10, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I put on here 10 different areas of cultural differences between Hispanics and non-Hispanics. You could find more. Maybe you would debate with me about some of these things. Again, please remember, this is not to paint everyone with the same brush. It is identifying tendencies so that you are aware that there may be some differences going on in your team or in the group that sent you or in the group that you are ministering with and to. So that you're not surprised and you're not just saying, well, they should be doing this or that, so that you're able to see other points of view besides your own. One of the places where there can be conflict and cultural tendencies is with personal identity. Is the family who you are, or is work who you are? Hispanics in general tend to identify, put their base identity in relationships, and particularly family relationships. I'm Maria's daughter. Work is primarily a source of income. By contrast, with many non-Hispanics, your personal identity comes from your work. I'm a carpenter, or I'm a teacher, or I'm a mechanic, or in this case, a doctor. That's my identity. This is something that tends to flow from what you call the Protestant work ethic. You know, Luther was one who pushed the idea that whatever we are doing in our work is a vocation from God, and we're doing it for the Lord. Now, obviously, you can abuse that, and you can become a workaholic when work becomes your God. Hispanics tend to have a little bit more holistic balance between work and family. However, it can be also taken to extremes as not seeing work as serving God. It's just something I do, and I'm going to do it in whatever way benefits me the most. Another area where there can be differences is on priorities. What's the most important thing, relationships or practical results? Hispanics tend to have a culture of being, as the sociologist put it. For them, people and interpersonal relationships are the most important thing, and success means good friendships and sharing with other people. By contrast, most non-Hispanics, Anglos especially, tend to be have a culture of doing. We want to see results. Results usually are numbers. We want to see material success, work accomplishments going on. As you can tell, this can be a problem in ministry because you might have a gathering, an event, and the Anglos are counting noses and saying, well, did we get more people in or less people? That's how we're going to evaluate whether this is working. The Hispanics may be saying, well, this was a great meeting, even though only 5 people came, because I was able to really strengthen my relationships with everyone present. Another area is what I would call cooperation, independence or dependence. Which is most important, the group or the individual? Many Hispanics see the individual as part of a group only. The individuals are dependent on the group. The individuals contribute to the group. Cooperation is more important than competition. We need to help each other. You should not be selfish and do everything for yourself. By contrast, many non-Hispanics value individualism. In fact, that is one thing that has infiltrated our Anglo church body to such a degree that we almost think it's scripture. Self-sufficiency is important. You got to pull yourself up. If you are not independent, then you are being lazy, or something's wrong with you. You're sick, maybe, or you have a disability. And so competition is very much a value rather than cooperation. You can see how this also would affect your team dynamics. Time, or perception of time, is something else that's a point of difference. For many Hispanics, and indeed for probably the greater part of the world, their perception of time is that it's a cycle. One day turns into night, then you've got another day, you've got another day. It's just a cycle. A week is followed by another week, a month is followed by another month, a year is followed by another year. By contrast, most of us non-Hispanics see time as linear. You have a starting point, you have an ending point. This means that for many Hispanics, time is an abundant resource. It's flexible. You didn't get it done today, tomorrow. There's always tomorrow. And it's important then to enjoy the moment, to take advantage of what's going on right now. People are more important than the clock. The meeting starts when everybody gets here. What's the problem? By contrast, many Anglos see time as linear, and that means that you don't have an unlimited amount of time. Time is fixed. It's important not to waste time. If you lose this much time, it's gone forever. And that means that being punctual is important. You can see how different this is going to be, okay? You have a meeting at church, and your Hispanics get there a half an hour late, and the Anglos are upset. The Hispanics are saying, why are these people upset? They don't care about us. They care about their clock. The Anglos are saying, why are these people so irresponsible and that they got to come here late? Don't they understand that they've been wasting our time? Don't they care about us? They only care about themselves. Again, different people are going to be different. One of the members of our board of directors is Hispanic through and through, but he is a stickler for time like you wouldn't believe. So please don't think that everybody is going to have the same characteristics just because they identify with a certain culture. However, this is something that has caused problems in the past and will cause problems in the future. Just to give you a quick example, when my wife and I moved back here to the United States, and we moved down to El Paso, Texas, my wife, she had been absorbing more and more of the majority culture here in the United States, but she had not absorbed yet the idea of the Anglo time. We were invited to go over to someone's house for dinner, and it got to be about 5 minutes till the hour, and I was saying, okay, we got to leave. We got to get over there. They're expecting us. And my wife was saying, no, they asked us to go at 6. It's only 5 till 6. Well, we shouldn't go over there now. And I really twisted her arm and made her get in the car. And we went out there to these people's houses, an Anglo couple. And when we went up to the door and knocked and the person opened, my wife, the first thing she said was, I told my husband that it was not courteous for us to be here at this hour. You weren't expecting us here at this time, were you? And the person said, yes, of course I was. Dinner is almost ready. So we need to be able to see each other's point of view. I think I may just leave this up to questions at this point. Mark?
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard. I enjoyed listening to this, and I wish we had another half an hour or so. That was, so thank you very much. A question is, if you were a congregation and you're seeing opportunity to share God's love with the Latinos or Hispanics in your area, how would you advise them to just start? What should they do to get started?
Get to know their neighbors.
Okay.
Yeah. You can think in terms of individuals, preparing individuals. I know some people say, hi, my goodness, I don't know how to talk to my neighbor who's they're from Mexico. So preparing people to be able to maybe have a point of contact to reach out would be helpful. But also as a congregation to take a look around the neighborhood and see, okay, how can we take the first step in reaching out to the people around us? Some people will say, well, maybe English classes. Well, maybe 10 different churches in the area have English classes. Maybe you don't need English classes. Maybe most of the people in your area are English dominant. That would be unnecessary totally. Maybe you might find a social outreach, some kind of a food pantry might be helpful in certain circumstances, but maybe you're in a middle class neighborhood. Maybe that's not going to work. Maybe what you need is some extracurricular activities for the kids, or maybe you need something else. You take a look around and you say, how can I show Jesus's love? How can I reach out to talk about him to the people around me? And that would be a good place to start. And don't worry if you make mistakes. I have a book called Juggling for the Complete Klutz. And it said, the very first page said, okay, take the 3 bean bags in your hand, throw it up in the air, watch it fall to the ground. This is called the drop. Get used to it. It will happen. And I think that sometimes we are so scared to take the first step because we're afraid of making a mistake that we don't realize we're gonna make mistakes. And God can even use our mistakes, okay? The thing is just step out. And when you see that you need to do something else, do it. Leave it in the Lord's hands, ask for his guidance, and go.
Very good, very good. And again, I would, for participants who'd like to submit a question or more questions through the question and answer feature on Zoom, feel free to do so. But this would sort of be a follow-up question. Okay, you've listened to the community, you have a better idea of who they are and what might be a way to approach ministry there. What is your favorite model for planting ethnic or Hispanic churches, if you have a favorite?
Let me just go back one more thing, Mark, to the previous question would be
Sure.
Prepare your own congregation.
Right.
Okay. Prepare your own congregation. Don't take it for granted that everybody's going to be on the same page. Look at the scriptures together, pray together. You're not going to get 100%. There's always going to be somebody who's grumpy and doesn't want whatever you're doing. But you need to be assured that the majority of the congregation is on board, that this is our ministry. We want to do this. Okay, and you're asking about models.
Yeah.
Personally, I think the model that is perhaps the most difficult, but the most biblical, is to be multicultural. I know that there's a lot of emphasis on having, a church just for Hispanics, and that way you can have a Hispanic flavor to worship. You can have all kinds of stuff. But I think that the Lord is going to have us up in heaven in a multicultural setting, and we probably need to get used to it here on earth. It's not easy. There are cultural clashes. You may find people that decide they don't want to be there and they leave. There's one church here in El Paso where the pastor, since we are 82% Hispanic, and we do have quite a few people who are Spanish dominant, the pastor just decided that he was going to give the blessing, the benediction, in Spanish as well as English. He had two families leave his church. One of them was very big giver. And the person told him, I hear Spanish all the time in my work. I don't want to hear it in my church. Okay, wow. If that's your attitude, don't get into Hispanic ministry. Okay, no.
Yeah.
Okay, but we do need to realize that it is tough. It's tough to give of yourself. You want to give something up of yours that you like because you're going to be with someone else who's different. Wow, that's not easy. And we tend to identify our culture with the Bible. It's not. But I think that that's the way to go. And I think that is the way to have also the different generations. If you're just going with a Spanish language, completely Hispanic, culturally speaking congregation, then the kids are going to go somewhere else.
Yeah. Very good. My daughter is teaching at a Lutheran school teacher at a congregation where they have a history of Chinese ministry. And so and now she is a fourth grade teacher and has children. They may speak Chinese, I don't know, but I certainly am rather sure that almost everyone, even their parents, are pretty fluent in Chinese by now. So just another example. I don't see any more questions at the moment, Richard, but thank you very much. Really appreciate this. And if folks would like to contact you, maybe you could share information.
I can do that at the end here. I can click through.
Okay.
Okay. This is maybe the last thing that I could say. Don't worry. You're not alone. God is with you. You don't have to be perfect. If you make a mistake, recognize the mistake. With God's help, correct it. Just go with the Lord's help. This is the information, my contact information. If you would like anything, we do have these are a couple of resources that are available. Together in Mission by Dr. Ken Benkin is available from the Pacific Southwest District. I think you have to ask for it specifically. I don't know that they have it advertised. Who Are Those Americans? By James Tino is an excellent book. He wrote it for immigrants coming into the United States, but it works just as well the other way. And you can get that on Amazon. And the Hispanic Ministry for Beginners is a document, a Word document that's up on our website, the Missionary Institute, for free.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Richard. And we thank those who joined us for this webinar also. And we pray that God's blessings will be with everyone. And don't forget to join us next month at this same hour for our next installment of a webinar for urban and inner city missions. And one more thanks to Pastor Schlak. It's good to see you. And boy, I've missed hearing your excitement and zeal for the gospel and the ministry to reach souls for Jesus. So thank you very much, sir, and blessings to all.
Thank you.